Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're looking at something most of us probably remember fondly. The
Mhm.
treehouse.
Yeah, that symbol of childhood freedom.
Right.
Little hideaway.
Exactly. But we've found some first-hand accounts that tell a really different story. Quite unsettling, actually.
Instead of just secret forts and games, these stories, they talk about vulnerability where you'd least expect it.
Right. So our goal here in this deep dive is to kind of explore that unexpected shift from sanctuary to, well, something much more menacing.
And to maybe understand the impact these experiences had, later on.
We've got three stories that really stood out. First, this very strange case involving someone called the Marshmallow Man.
Mm-hmm. And disturbing note.
Then there's this just truly bizarre story about a little boy's friend in the treehouse. A friend who maybe wasn't imaginary.
That one's particularly strange.
And finally, a really chilling encounter. An inexplicable voice in the dark. A voice that knew a child's name.
Ooh.
Okay, so let's get into this.
It's such a stark contrast, isn't it? You have this cultural image of the treehouse, private, safe, up above everything.
It's its own little world.
And then these stories just turn that completely upside down.
And when that feeling of safety gets shaken, especially as a kid.
The impact can be huge,
Yeah.
really significant, long-lasting.
Absolutely. So let's start with that first one. The Marshmallow Man. You can almost picture it, right? A kid, maybe 10 years old, finds little notes in the treehouse.
Starts off maybe like a game, a little mystery.
You'd think so. But these notes, they weren't playful, signed the Marshmallow Man. And they got sinister pretty fast.
Culminating in that question.
Yeah, that really chilling question. Which window is your bedroom?
Wow. That's a massive jump.
It really is. From maybe fun notes to something deeply invasive, what does that do to a kid's sense of safety, even inside their own house?
Well, that question just shatters the boundary, doesn't it? The treehouse is supposed to be separate. But this suggests the outside world, a threatening part of it, hasn't just found the hideout, but is now zooming in on the most personal space, the bedroom.
Right. It plants that seed of fear, suspicion, in the one place you should feel totally secure.
Exactly. Comfort, security, gone.
And then the story gets even darker. One night, the boy's in his room. You have to imagine that question is just rattling around in his head.
Oh, for sure.
And he's woken up, tapping at his window.
Okay.
And what he sees is genuinely nightmarish. An older man, grinning horribly rotten teeth,
Oh, gosh.
pressing marshmallows against the window pane.
Marshmallows, that's
Um,
bizarre and terrifying.
It's such a weird, awful image, taking this symbol of like childhood sweetness, campfires, then twisting into something so menacing. Why marshmallows, do you think? What's the psychology there?
Well, the choice of the marshmallow itself is unsettling, isn't it?
Yeah.
Taking something associated with innocence, with treats, and using it as part of a threat. It's a perversion, really.
Like the treehouse itself being violated?
Exactly. And the rotting teeth just add to that sense of decay, malevolence. It makes the whole encounter feel like a nightmare. Maybe the sheer weirdness, the incongruity of the marshmallow and the threat is what makes it so effective, so memorable in a bad way.
And what makes this one so unnerving is there's no real closure.
Right.
The police looked into it apparently, but this Marshmallow Man never found, never identified.
So just vanished.
Kind of, but here's the detail that just sticks with you. For years after this happened, the boy's parents would find marshmallows. Just randomly. In their yard.
No way.
Seriously.
Scattered around.
Oh, that's awful, that lingering element.
It's this constant subtle reminder, isn't it, that the threat, whatever it was, might still be around, somehow.
How does that kind of unresolved thing affect a kid long term? That feeling of safety?
That must be terrible.
Well, that continuation, finding the marshmallows. It stops it from being just one bad night.
Right, it makes it feel deliberate, ongoing.
Yeah, like a sustained psychological intrusion, almost a low-level torment, keeping the fear alive. Because you can't process it, you can't move on if there's no resolution.
Exactly. No regaining control, no feeling safe again. It leaves this open wound, and these weird reminders just keep poking at it.
It really shows how easily that childhood feeling of being safe, maybe even invincible, can just shatter.
And the long shadow something like that can cast, definitely.
It really does. Okay, let's shift gears to the second story. A different kind of unsettling. Jake wasn't imaginary.
Right. This one starts out almost wholesome.
Yeah, a dad builds a treehouse for his son, Luke. Classic parent move, right?
Right.
Creating this special private world.
A gesture of love.
But pretty soon, Luke starts talking about playing with a friend named Jake.
Okay. Imaginary friend. Lots of kids have those.
That's what you'd think. But the key thing is, Jake only appears in the treehouse. Nowhere else.
Okay, that is a bit unusual, isn't it? That exclusivity. Just this one isolated place.
Yeah. What does that suggest, do you think? A friendship confined just to that spot.
Well, it suggests a deliberate separation, maybe.
Yeah.
A boundary defined by the treehouse itself. It's different from a typical imaginary friend who might, follow the child around the house or to the park.
Right. They're usually more portable.
Exactly. So, this isolation, it could hint that there's something unusual about Jake himself. Or maybe about what Luke's doing up there.
And things get concerning when Luke comes home with a black eye.
Okay, that changes things.
Naturally, the dad investigates, goes up to the treehouse, and what he finds is, well, deeply disturbing.
What did he find?
Rotting sneakers. Old food wrappers, suggesting someone's actually been spending time there.
Living there. Or just hanging out.
Unclear at first, but then there are these drawings. Really strange drawings. Animals, but with human faces.
Ooh, that's unsettling. That blurring of lines.
Totally. What could drawings like that even mean?
Well, the wrappers and sneakers show it's not just playtime anymore, right? Someone is using that space, maybe inhabiting it. The drawings, they're really evocative. Blending animal and human features often taps into some primal anxieties about nature, about us.
Yeah.
It makes things feel uncanny, not quite right, maybe hinting at something, not quite human, or just a really distorted view of the world.
And then comes the moment that just turns everything on its head.
Okay.
The father actually sees Jake climbing down from the treehouse.
Whoa. So he was real, not imaginary at all.
Not at all. This was a real child,
Yep.
described as gaunt, filthy, clearly having a rough time.
Gosh.
And this kid, Jake, whispers to the dad about living in the woods with his animal friends.
Animal friends, like the drawings.
Maybe. And the chilling part, he says he wants Luke to come join them, live in the woods too.
Wow. It's like a dark fairy tale twist, an invitation to run away into the wild.
Exactly. What sort of dangers does a kid like Jake represent, and how vulnerable is Luke in that situation?
Well, this encounter confirms Jake is real, but it just deepens the mystery,
Right.
And the potential threat.
Definitely.
His appearance, wanting Luke to join him, it raises huge questions about Jake's background, his situation, his intentions. Is he lost? Is he dangerous?
You just don't know.
It really highlights how these seemingly innocent places, like a backyard treehouse, can, hide dangers. And how vulnerable kids can be, even in spaces meant for safety.
The ambiguity around Jake, his animal friends, it's incredibly unsettling.
Profoundly so. It
Yeah.
leaves you with this real unease.
Yeah. So many questions left hanging. Was Jake a runaway? Was something worse going on out there in the woods? The not knowing is almost the worst part.
It really is. That lack of explanation makes it stick with you.
Okay, let's move to our final story. The voice that knew his name.
This one feels different, maybe more overtly supernatural.
Okay.
It centers on a 12-year-old boy, Tommy. He's sleeping in his treehouse, maybe feeling grown up, wanting his own space.
Yeah, that age of wanting independence. A little bit of separation.
What kind of mindset is a kid in sleeping alone out there, even if it's just the backyard?
Well, sleeping alone, especially somewhere slightly isolated like that,
Yeah.
it can heighten your awareness,
Make you jumpy. Yeah, more susceptible to weird sounds, shadows, darkness, rustling leaves. It can amplify any little bit of unease, or just make your imagination go wild.
Right. It's that half awake, half asleep state.
Exactly. Perceptions get a bit fluid.
So he's woken up by a voice. A deep voice. Calling his name. Tommy.
Oh, just that. A voice calling his name. In the dark.
Yeah. That alone is enough to give you chills, right? This disembodied voice specifically calling him.
Definitely. Personal.
But then it gets visual and truly terrifying. Tommy sees a head, a shadowy head, rising up through the floorboards of the treehouse.
Through the floor. From underneath.
Yes, emerging from the very structure that's supposed to be his safe, elevated spot.
Wow. That image. That taps into some primal fears, doesn't it?
How so?
Something coming from below. From the unseen depths.
Yeah.
It violates the basic physical safety of the space.
Like the monster under the bed, but worse.
Kind of. It suggests an intrusion from somewhere unknown, somewhere potentially really threatening. And the fact it's shadowy, indistinct, that makes it scarier. Your mind fills in the blanks.
And the voice knew his name. That makes it targeted.
Exactly. That personal violation, again, it suggests this isn't random. It's focused on him.
Understandably, Tommy screams. And the figure, it retreats, goes back down.
Okay. So it reacted to the scream.
Yeah, but the impact on Tommy, it lasts. Years later, he's still thinking about it, wrestling with it. Who or what was that figure?
You would be, wouldn't you?
Was it just some elaborate prank?
Yeah.
Or, and this is the really unsettling possibility the story hints at, was it something that had been watching him for years?
Ooh, that idea.
Yes.
Constant, unseen surveillance.
And for that watching to suddenly manifest in his private sanctuary in such a terrifying way.
What are the psychological effects of feeling watched like that? Especially in a place you think is safe.
It must be awful.
Well, feeling watched is a fundamental violation, isn't it? Of privacy, of autonomy.
Uh-huh.
To experience that in a space where you should feel secure, in control, it can cause lasting anxiety, a real sense of vulnerability.
And the name thing again?
Right. The fact it knew his name suggests that deliberate focus. Makes it way more personal, more threatening.
Yeah.
Can just erode your trust in your surroundings, create this lingering suspicion, this unease.
So when you put these three stories together, Marshmallow Man, Jake the voice, a really clear, disturbing pattern starts to show up, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does.
The very place that's meant to be a refuge, you know, a cherished spot for childhood freedom, security.
It becomes the opposite. A place of exposure, potential danger.
It leads to that really chilling line from the source material we looked at. Tree houses don't hide children, they expose them.
That hits hard, doesn't it?
It really does. What is it about a treehouse specifically that might inadvertently create these vulnerabilities?
Well, paradoxically, maybe it's the very things that make them appealing.
How do you mean?
Their elevation, their separation from the main house, that feeling of being a little world unto itself.
Right, makes them feel special, private.
But that isolation can also mean less adult supervision, maybe a greater chance for unwanted intrusions to just go unnoticed.
So the feeling of being hidden is actually a double-edged sword.
Okay. Yeah.
It really makes you pause and think about your own sense of security, doesn't it? Even in places you feel totally safe, totally alone. That little nagging question, am I really unobserved?
And that brings up a point for everyone listening, perhaps.
Yeah.
Have you ever had an experience like that? Something that made you question the safety or the privacy of a place you thought was your sanctuary, your safe space?
It's worth reflecting on, maybe.
We'd certainly invite you to think about those moments, maybe even share your own stories if you feel comfortable.
Absolutely. We'd be really interested to hear if any of this resonates, if you've had similar unsettling experiences.
Yeah?
And maybe as you go about your day, just take a second look at those familiar childhood places in your memory.
Or even current places.
Right. And perhaps, just perhaps, check those floorboards one more time.
You never know what might be just beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Even in the most innocent seeming spots.